Hello everybody, my name's Miss Vanessa and I'd like to welcome you guys to another STEAM program online. Today I want to talk about meteorites and more specifically micrometeorites. A meteorite is like a dust particle or a rock that is found in space. A micrometeorite is a super teeny tiny meteorite that has managed to break through the Earth's atmosphere and land on Earth. Every single day, 60,000 tons of micrometeorites land on Earth. And that might sound like a lot, but in reality, micrometeorites are super tiny, so they spread all around the world, and it's actually possible for us to find these. Most of these are magnetic, so I am going to go on an adventure today and try to find us some micrometeorites. We might be successful, we might not, but that's kind of the fun of it. I'm going to go outside and I'm going to take a very powerful magnet and I'm going to run this around the ground and see if I can find anything that's magnetic. The thing is that there's a lot of things on Earth that are already magnetic, so we might find like little pieces of steel or rocks that have some sort of metal that is magnetic. And not all of these are going to be micrometeorites, but we're going to be looking for some very specific features in the rocks that we find. We're going to be looking for rocks that are very smooth, rocks that are very round, rocks that you can see have experienced like melting at some point, because when a meteorite comes into Earth's surface, it starts to melt away, and usually it creates a perfect circle. So that's what we're going to be looking for. I do have here meteorites that I have gotten from rockets. So this is what it looks like. This one is much bigger than anything that we're going to find outside. And if we take a close look at it, it is very smooth. It's also very magnetic. So if we bring this to our super powerful magnet, we're going to see right away it's going to stick. So what we're looking for is something super magnetic. So let's go outside and see what we can find.
Hi guys, so I am outside at the library right now and I am ready to start my micrometeorite search. And as I mentioned, you can find micrometeorites just about everywhere. So I'm going to show you some places I think I might find some. We're going to use my super powerful magnet to try to pick up anything that's magnetic, and then we're going to search through it and see if we can find any potential micrometeorites. So let's get started. What I'm looking for is a collection of rocks and pebbles kind of on the side of the road. I'm going to run my magnet across this and see if anything sticks to our magnet. Alright, it looks like we've got some. I am going to empty out whatever I found into my container and we will keep on searching.
so I'm back from my adventure outside. I actually found a lot of things that were magnetic outside. So let's start by taking a look at the contents of my container. So it looks like there's a whole lot in there, and I'm seeing a lot of big rocks and a lot of things that are very, very obviously not meteorites. So the first thing I'm going to do before I do anything else is I'm going to get a pair of gloves and make sure that I'm being safe before I explore this. Okay, I have my gloves on, and I'm going to start taking a peek at what is not a meteorite, because I'm going to want to separate that out beforehand. So I have a container here, or a little tray here that says not meteorite. Here is our possible meteorite. And this is going to be our miscellaneous. This is where we're going to be doing our exploring. In a little bit, I'm going to change perspective so that we can take a much closer look at what I'm looking at. And then when we find possible meteorites, I'm going to put them under the microscope and see what they look like and if we can actually determine if they are a meteorite. Because as I mentioned, we're looking for very specific characteristics. We're looking for something that's going to be super round, something that's super smooth, and something that has experienced melting at some point. And as I mentioned, I have a lot here, so let's start kind of taking out anything that I'm pretty positive is not a meteorite. So the first thing I notice is this really big rock that looks like it has a lot of things sticking to it. So this is actually kind of magnetic itself, so I don't think that that's going to be a meteorite. I also have this really big rock here, so I'm going to take out the bigger rocks first, things that are very obviously not meteorites. So here's another big rock. And let's move all of those out of the way. We have a staple. Okay, so I have removed all of my really big rocks here, and I have them kind of out of the way now. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to take a much closer look at what I have here and see if we can find any potential micrometeorites. So let's take a closer look. Okay, so let's do a little bit of exploring. I have my gloves on, and I also have a headlamp to help me take a closer look at everything inside of our bowl. But to take a closer look, here is what I have found outside. And I can see right off the bat that there are still a lot of rocks in here. There's also right here like tiny pieces of metal, so I'm going to move those out of the way as we're exploring this, and we're going to see if we can find anything that's perfectly round and anything that is really smooth in texture, and we'll see if we can find any micrometeorites. So let's take a look. As we saw with our meteorite, we have meteorites are actually very, very responsive to magnets. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my magnet on here and make sure that everything that I have in here is in fact magnetic. And anything that's not, we're just going to discard onto our not meteorite. Okay. So this is going to give us a better look at what is inside of here. So let's take a peek and see if we can spot anything right off the bat that is really smooth in texture, something that's really, really round. So let's remove our magnet and see what we can see. So something that's really standing out to me is right here. There is a very, very shiny rock. And it looks like it's definitely experienced some melting. So I'm going to put that in our possible meteorite container, and we're going to keep on looking. What I'm looking for is something super, super smooth and round. You know what's going to be really unfortunate is if I'm looking back at this later on and I see something that I'm not seeing right now. Do you guys see this? To me, that looks like something that has experienced some melting. So I am going to take this and put it in our possible. And there's also another one right here that also looks very similar. Alright, here is another one that I'm noticing has very smooth in texture. Not completely round, but definitely doesn't look like everything else in here. Okay, so I'm going to pick this up again tomorrow, and we're going to try to keep looking for different potential micrometeorites, and then we'll look at them under the microscope. Alright, so it's the next day, and I am ready to do a little bit more searching of our rocks and sediments and possible micrometeorites. We've already found a good amount of tiny objects that have the potential of being micrometeorites. I think the thing that is the most promising in here is this teeny tiny, perfectly spherical piece of metal that I found. And we'll look at that under the microscope in a little bit, but for now, I'm going to do a little bit more searching and see if we can find any more possible samples. So let's keep on looking. Alright, so let's keep on searching for today. I'm going to see if I can find any more micrometeorites. And the funny thing is right off the bat, I noticed something perfectly spherical that we did not see yesterday. Now, I'm going to try really carefully to pick it up and put it on our tray. Okay, there it is. So we can see right there, it's this teeny tiny little speck that is almost completely perfectly spherical, and it's floating around all over the place. It looks like it's repelling the tongs. But I'm going to add that to our potential micrometeorites and see if we can find anything else. And then I see another potential micrometeorite here. This one has a lot of melting that you can tell. I'm going to put that to the side. And let's see if we can spot any more. All right, here we have another potential micrometeorite. This one might be a little too big, but it looks like it has a decent amount of melting on it, so I say we look at it under the microscope. I have found another potential micrometeorite, and it's right here. I'm going to try to pull it away from everything else so I can kind of pluck it up. Okay, the funny thing is that even though they're so difficult to pick up, they are so obviously spherical that they kind of stand out from everything else. So, okay, so I've done some really good searching of this, and I think I've caught almost everything in here that I think is perfectly spherical and that has experienced a lot of melting. And I think we're about ready to take a look at what we have found under the microscope. So here is what we have. Some of these I've picked up because they were perfectly spherical, and some of them I grabbed because they seem to have experienced a lot of melting. So let's take a look at them under the microscope and see what they look like. Alright, so I have my microscope set up here, and right now I have my actual meteorite under the microscope so I can take a look and see what that looks like and then compare it to our potential micrometeorites. So we're going to switch perspectives between you looking at me and then also seeing what I'm seeing in the microscope. So I'll talk a little bit about what I see. And if I believe that anything that we found is actually a meteorite. So remember, what we're looking for is something smooth, something round, and something that's experienced a lot of melting. And so let's see what we see. First, let me take a look at our meteorite. Okay, so I see that it is very smooth. And I see a lot of the melting features in there. I'm going to move it around a little bit. Here is our view of our meteorite. Something that I notice is we can see where it has experienced some melting up on the right side, and it's also very smooth. Okay, so that's what we see in our meteorite. Next, I think the thing that I was the most excited to look at was our perfectly spherical specimen. So I found, it looks like 1, 2, 3 of those, and one of them is super teeny tiny, and the other two are a little bit bigger, and we're going to try to look at those under the microscope. Okay, let's see if I can see it. There we go. I'm going to move it a little bit over. Okay. What I'm seeing is that our specimen is almost perfectly spherical, and I definitely see some around the rim of it. It looks like there's a bunch of melting that has happened. So I think there's a potential that this is definitely a micrometeorite. So here's your perspective. So this is our first potential micrometeorite, and as I mentioned, it's perfectly spherical, and around the edges we see where it definitely has experienced some melting. So that's super exciting. We've got one that is almost more than likely a micrometeorite. And then here is our second spherical one, and we'll compare it to that first one we saw and see if it's the same, if we can see that it's perfectly spherical and if it's got melting around the edges. So let's take a look. So this one's super interesting because it looks really, really sparkly. It's something that I definitely didn't notice at first, but it is definitely perfectly spherical. Take a look at it.
Here is our second potential micrometeorite, and as I mentioned, it's perfectly spherical, and it's actually really sparkly.
So for this one, I actually am not sure if it's a micrometeorite. The first one, I'm pretty confident we found a micrometeorite. This one, I don't know what it is, but I want to say that it probably is a micrometeorite. So we've got the super teeny tiny one that I mentioned. And we'll see if I can get that one on there. It's jumping around like crazy. Okay. So there it is. I'm going to move it into place and see if we can see it. Okay, so for our third one, I'm noticing that it's not 100% spherical, but it's got that same sparkly effect that the second one did. So take a look at it.
Here is our third micrometeorite, or potential micrometeorite, and as I mentioned, not perfectly spherical, but it does have that same sparkly effect.
So the verdict for this one is another I don't know. Unless we get a scientist in here, I don't know if we could ever confirm that any of these are 100% definitively micrometeorites. So these last few, there's one of them that's much different than the others. So I'm going to take a look at one of the ones that I notice is melted. I might put a couple side by side so that we can compare them to each other. And then there's another one in there that looks a little different than the rest. And we'll take a look at that one under the microscope as well. I found it. Our first one, I see some kind of rigid points on it. I do see some parts where I think may have experienced some melting. Take a look at it. Okay, our second one on here has definitely experienced some melting. I can see that even with my naked eye, but under the microscope I can see that a little bit better. And it's also got that sparkly effect that the second one had. Here it is. Okay, and then our last one in that group of three that I put on there, this one also has some rigid edges around the edge. And you know what? I'm thinking this one's probably not a micrometeorite. Take a look at it. Okay, so the last one that I wanted to take a look at under the microscope is this really weirdly shaped one that I can tell almost for sure that it's experienced some melting. If not, it's probably rusting. But let's see what this looks like. Okay. As I mentioned, this one's super interesting shaped, and I don't understand what it could be. It might be a micrometeorite, but I'm not sure. It just looks really, really interesting under the microscope. Take a look at it. So I think overall I found 2 possible micrometeorites and a couple potential micrometeorites. I had a whole bunch of fun actually looking through these, going outside and collecting them, and then looking at them under the microscope. So I hope you guys had some fun. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you guys join me in the next video. Bye!